You know that thing where a conversation ends normally, completely normally, and then 6 hours later your brain reopens it like there's been a major development in the case? You're brushing your teeth, lying in bed, heating something up in the microwave, and suddenly there it is again, that one sentence, that one pause, the weird tone in your voice, the moment you laughed a little too hard or answered a little too fast or said something that sounded, in retrospect, slightly off, and now your mind is just running it back. Why did I say it like that? Did that sound insecure? Did I talk too much? Why did they pause before answering? Did I make it awkward? Do they think I'm weird now? And the worst part is that the conversation is over. Completely inaccessible, sealed off. No edits, no clarifications, no director's cut. The other person is probably eating dinner or watching something stupid on their phone while you're in full forensic analysis mode, replaying a 2-minute interaction like it's body cam footage from a crime scene. If you do this a lot, if you constantly replay conversations in your head long after they happen, it can feel ridiculous. A little pathetic even. Like maybe you're too sensitive, too self-conscious, too anxious to move through the world like a normal person. But here's the thing nobody tells you. People who do this are not dramatic. They are not weak. And they are usually not overthinking for no reason. There is often something very specific happening in their psychology. And once you understand it, this habit stops looking like a personality flaw and starts looking like what it actually is, a protection strategy. Because that's what your brain thinks it's doing, protecting you. Let's start with something simple. Human beings are social creatures, but your brain does not experience social situations as casual? Not really. On the surface, sure, it was just a conversation. But underneath that, your nervous system may have registered something much bigger. Did I belong there? Did they like me? Did I reveal too much? Did I lose status? Did I say something that will make them pull away? Most people think replaying conversations is just overthinking. But overthinking is usually not random. It has a function. And in this case, the function is often social damage control. Your brain is scanning the interaction for mistakes before those mistakes turn into rejection, embarrassment, or disconnection. That's why this habit shows up so often in people who are highly socially aware. Not arrogant, not self-absorbed, aware, sometimes painfully aware. The kind of people who notice a shift in tone, a delayed text, a half-second facial expression, a sentence that landed slightly wrong. And because they notice so much, they review so much. Psychologists have a term that helps explain part of this: negativity bias. Your brain gives more weight to things that feel potentially threatening than to things that feel neutral. 10 parts of a conversation can go perfectly fine, but one slightly awkward moment will glow in the dark. Not because it mattered that much, but because your brain marked it as maybe dangerous. And maybe dangerous is enough. That's how this works. Your mind isn't asking, what's most likely? It's asking, what's the worst thing this could mean? A pause becomes disapproval. A short reply becomes annoyance. A neutral face becomes hidden judgment. Your brain would rather falsely identify a threat than miss a real one. From an evolutionary standpoint, that makes sense. But in modern life, it creates a lot of unnecessary suffering. And there's another layer here that gets a little more personal. A lot of people who replay conversations are not fully inside conversations while they're having them. They're split. One part of them is talking, listening, responding. The other part is monitoring. How do I sound right now? Am I being normal? Am I talking too much? Was that joke weird? Should I have said that? Do they look uncomfortable? Psychologists sometimes refer to this as heightened self-monitoring. You're not just in the interaction. You're observing yourself in the interaction, watching yourself from the outside in real time, editing as you go, trying to manage the impression you're making while also trying to actually exist as a person. That's exhausting. And it explains why the conversation never really ends when it ends, because some part of you was recording the entire time, which means later, when you're finally alone, the playback begins. But here's where it gets uncomfortable, because this habit usually didn't appear out of nowhere. People who chronically replay conversations often learned, at some point, that saying the wrong thing had consequences. Maybe you grew up around criticism. Maybe you were misunderstood a lot. Maybe you were around unpredictable people whose moods could shift without warning. Maybe sincerity got mocked. Maybe vulnerability got used against you. Maybe you just spent enough time feeling socially off that your brain decided it would be safer to start reviewing everything. So it adapted. It became careful, precise, hyper-aware. It started treating conversations the way anxious people treat door locks. Check once, check twice, check again just to be sure. Not because it's enjoyable, but because uncertainty feels dangerous. And that's what a lot of this really comes down to. Uncertainty. One psychological concept that fits here almost perfectly is the Zeigarnik effect, which is the tendency for unfinished things to stay active in the mind. If a conversation felt unresolved, emotionally incomplete, or vaguely ambiguous, your brain may refuse to file it away. It keeps returning to it because to your nervous system, it is still open. You didn't get reassurance. You didn't get clarity. You didn't get a clean ending. So the tab stays open. And people who do this a lot tend to have many tabs open at once. That awkward work conversation from 3 days ago. The joke nobody reacted to last month. The text you sent with the tone that might have been wrong. That look on someone's face after you said something personal. What did that look mean? This is also where replaying conversations stops being reflection and turns into rumination. Reflection is useful. Rumination is repetitive. Reflection helps you understand something and move on. Rumination just keeps dragging the same emotional file back onto the screen and dimming the whole room with it. And the tricky part is that rumination feels productive. It feels like you're solving. It feels like you're preparing. It feels like if you just review it one more time, you'll finally land on the correct interpretation and be free. Usually you won't, because most conversations do not contain the level of meaning your anxious brain assigns to them. Most people are not studying you with anywhere near the intensity that you study yourself. They are not replaying your wording, your timing, your facial expressions, your pauses. They are busy doing the same thing with themselves. And that's not an insult. That's freedom. The sentence you've been carrying around all day may have barely registered to them. The moment that felt exposing to you may have looked entirely normal from the outside. The pause you turned into a whole narrative might have just been a pause. That is the brutal irony of this habit. Your brain is trying to save you from rejection, but in the process, it creates a private version of rejection all by itself. It invents the wound, then studies it. Now, none of this means replaying conversations is always a bad sign. Sometimes it comes from empathy, from conscience, from the fact that you genuinely care about impact. You care how you made someone feel. You care whether you were fair, whether you were too much, whether you crossed a line, whether you showed up well. That's not cruelty. That's not narcissism. That's a sensitive mind trying very hard to get things right. But protection can become overprotection. And there comes a point where your own mind starts treating every imperfect social moment like evidence in a case against you. That's the part that needs to change. Not your sensitivity, not your care. Just the assumption that every awkward interaction is dangerous. Because sometimes a conversation was just slightly awkward. Sometimes a pause is just a pause. Sometimes a sentence came out a little wrong and then vanished into the general mess of human interaction where almost everything vanishes. People are clumsy. Conversations are imperfect. That is not a crisis. That is just being alive around other people. So if you replay conversations in your head, here's the more accurate way to understand yourself. You are probably highly aware, highly sensitive, maybe a little hypervigilant, maybe trained by past experience to read between the lines because once upon a time you had to. Your brain notices nuance, it tracks tone, it scans for shifts. It wants to keep you connected, it wants to keep you safe, It just doesn't always know when the danger has passed, and that's why you keep going back. Not because you're broken, not because you're weak, not because you're secretly self-obsessed, because your mind learned that social mistakes might cost you something, and it got very, very good at trying to prevent them. A little too good. The goal is not to stop caring. It's not to become careless or cold. It's to stop treating every conversation like it needs an autopsy. Sometimes it was meaningful. Sometimes there is something to learn. And sometimes it was just a conversation that happened, ended, and does not need to follow you into the rest of your night. If this resonated with you, subscribe. I've got more videos like this coming, and I think you'll probably see yourself in the next one too.